The unstoppable invasion emerges empire. The sun was setting on Earth when the first signs of the invasion appeared. At first, it seemed like a strange, distant cloud drifting across the sky. But as the hours passed, it became clear that this was no ordinary storm. Across the globe, people looked up in confusion and awe as more and more dark shapes began to emerge from the sky. News outlets scrambled to report, but their signals were quickly jammed. Social media exploded with videos of massive alien ships descending towards Earth, but no one could understand exactly what was happening. The ships were enormous, so big that they blocked out the sun in some areas, casting long shadows across entire cities. The ground shook as they landed, their engines humming with a sound that made the air vibrate. This was no peaceful visit. Earth was under attack. The ships belonged to an alien empire, one that had been watching Earth for centuries, waiting for the right moment to strike. This empire was unlike any other. Their technology was far superior, their ships larger and more powerful than anything humans had ever built. The invasion was meticulously planned. These aliens knew everything about Earth. They knew its weaknesses, its cities, its resources. They knew humanity's strengths, but they also knew that those strengths wouldn't be enough to stop them. They had watched as human history unfolded, wars, alliances, betrayals, and survival. But they had also seen humanity's ability to fight and survive against all odds. This made them dangerous, for the aliens feared humanity's resilience. As the ships landed, panic spread. Cities across the world went into lockdown, but it was already too late. The aliens unleashed their forces. Soldiers in sleek, silver armor began to disembark from their ships, moving with precision, their weapons glowing ominously. They were not here to negotiate. They were here to conquer. The first wave of attack was swift. They targeted key military installations and government centers, neutralizing Earth's defenses before they could even get organized. Weapons fired from the alien ships, decimating entire cities. It was like nothing anyone had ever seen. The aliens unleashed deadly energy beams, reducing buildings to rubble in seconds. Thousands of lives were lost in the blink of an eye. The world's leaders quickly tried to organize a defense, but they were no match for the alien technology. The most powerful military forces in the world launched their best weapons at the invaders, but nothing seemed to have any effect. The alien shields absorbed the firepower, and their counterattacks were devastating. Bombers were shot down midair, tanks were crushed underfoot, and entire armies were wiped out in minutes. In the midst of the chaos, a group of human soldiers in a small town in the United States were among the first to fight back. They had seen the destruction of nearby cities and knew that their town was next. With no formal orders and no hope of reinforcements, they took it upon themselves to defend their homes. Armed with basic weapons, they fought fiercely, knowing they didn't stand a chance against the aliens' superior technology. But they fought anyway. They would not go down without a fight. The town's survivors took shelter in the woods, hiding from the invaders. The soldiers tried to organize a resistance, but they knew it would only be a matter of time before they were overrun. Despite the overwhelming odds, they refused to give up. In the face of certain death, they stood strong, knowing that every second they bought was a second that would help humanity prepare for the worst. Across the world, the story was the same. People were being forced into hiding as the invaders systematically destroyed everything in their path. The aliens didn't seem to care about the destruction they caused. Their only goal was complete domination. But there was something the invaders had underestimated: the human spirit. The more the aliens destroyed, the more humans resisted. People started to rise up in small pockets, organizing themselves into guerrilla groups. Even though they were outmatched, they'd fought back. They used everything at their disposal: old weapons, tools, even homemade bombs. They didn't care that they were up against a technologically advanced empire. They had one thing the aliens didn't: determination. Back in the capital cities, world leaders and military generals scrambled to find a way to stop the invasion. Desperation set in as Earth's most advanced technologies seemed useless against the alien onslaught. But even as hope seemed to fade, there was a flicker of something in the air, a promise that humanity would not go quietly into the night. The invaders, despite their overwhelming power, had underestimated one key thing: humans never gave up. And it was that resilience, that refusal to be conquered, which would drive the story forward. Little did the aliens know, their attempt to conquer Earth was far from over. The real battle had just begun. A last stand. As the days passed, the Earth seemed to be in a constant state of chaos. Cities were in ruins, and communication networks had collapsed. The alien empire's overwhelming power left the human population scattered and broken. The hope for a coordinated global response quickly faded, and many people simply went into survival mode. But amid the darkness, small pockets of resistance were starting to form. In the heart of what was once a thriving city, a group of survivors, soldiers, civilians, and scientists, found themselves thrown together by chance. They had no plans, no resources, but they shared one thing in common: the will to fight back. Among them was Captain Sarah Carter, a tough, battle-hardened leader who had survived the initial wave of the invasion. She had witnessed the destruction of her hometown and the deaths of countless friends, but she had also seen something that gave her hope: the sheer determination of people who refused to surrender. Sarah stood in front of the makeshift war room, her eyes scanning the group gathered before her. They were a mix of different backgrounds, each of them having their own stories of loss, survival, and defiance. But now, they were united by one cause: to take the fight to the aliens. "We may be outnumbered, but we are not without weapons," Sarah said, her voice steady. "We may not have the military might of entire nations, but we have something far more important. We have the element of surprise, and we have our determination. We will take the fight to them, and we will make them regret underestimating us." The group exchanged looks, their faces a mix of fear and resolve. They all knew the odds were stacked against them, but they also knew they couldn't sit back and wait for death. If Earth was to have any chance at survival, they had to strike first. Plans were quickly made. The survivors discovered that the aliens had set up a series of communication towers across the globe to coordinate their attack. These towers were their eyes and ears, allowing them to maintain control of the invasion. If they could take out these towers, they could cripple the alien forces. It was a risky plan, but it was the only chance they had. The survivors divided into smaller groups, each tasked with taking out one of the towers. Sarah led one group, and as they moved through the desolate landscape, the tension was palpable. Every shadow felt like an enemy, every sound a potential attack. They were constantly on the move, staying hidden as much as possible. But despite the fear, there was an underlying sense of hope. They knew they couldn't let the aliens win, not without a fight. As they approached their target, a towering alien structure in the middle of a destroyed city, Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She knew that if they were discovered, they wouldn't stand a chance. The aliens' technology was so far beyond theirs that any direct confrontation would be suicide. But they had to try. "Stay sharp," Sarah whispered to her team as they crouched in the shadows, observing the tower from a distance. The alien soldiers patrolled the area, their eyes scanning every corner. Sarah knew that one mistake would cost them everything. They waited for the perfect moment. The alien patrols had a routine, and if they timed it right, they could slip past undetected. It was a calculated risk, but it was their only chance. Sarah gestured to her team, signaling for them to move. The group moved quickly, silently, as they made their way to the base of the tower. There was no time to waste. Sarah and her team placed explosives around the tower's foundation, carefully ensuring that the blast would disable the alien communication network without drawing too much attention. Every second felt like an eternity as they worked. Finally, the charges were set. Sarah gave a nod to her team, signaling them to retreat. They ran for cover, hearts racing, as they heard the sound of alien footsteps drawing closer. Just as they reached safety, Sarah pressed the detonator. The explosion was deafening, shaking the ground beneath them. Dust and debris flew into the air as the alien tower crumbled to the ground. But the victory was short-lived. The blast had attracted the attention of nearby alien patrols, and they quickly began searching for the culprits. The survivors scrambled to escape, ducking behind ruins and taking cover wherever they could. Shots rang out as the aliens closed in, and the humans were forced into a fight for their lives. One by one, the survivors fell, but Sarah refused to give up. She fought with everything she had, her hands shaking as she fired at the approaching aliens. She watched as her comrades fell around her, each of them fighting with the last bit of strength they had. It was a brutal battle, but they were determined to make their stand. When the dust finally settled, the alien patrols had retreated, but Sarah was the only one left standing. Her heart was heavy with the loss of her team, but she knew that their sacrifice had not been in vain. The alien communication tower had been destroyed, and for the first time, humanity had struck a blow against the invaders. Though the battle was won, the war was far from over. As Sarah stood amidst the wreckage of the alien tower, she realized that Earth's fight for survival had just begun. But in that moment, there was a flicker of hope. Humanity had shown that it would not be easily conquered, and the aliens would soon learn that their invasion was far from unstoppable. The battle for survival. In the days following the destruction of the alien communication tower, the survivors scattered in different directions, meeting in secret to regroup. News of the successful attack on the alien forces spread like wildfire, and it was exactly the spark humanity needed. Though the victory had come at a heavy cost, it had proven that Earth could fight back. The aliens were not invincible, and that knowledge was worth its weight in gold. Sarah Carter, now one of the most recognized leaders of the resistance, met with a group of engineers and military strategists. They had begun to realize that they couldn't rely solely on guerrilla tactics and hoped that the aliens would leave them alone. The aliens were not here to negotiate. They were here to dominate. To win, humanity needed to understand their enemy, their technology, and what made them tick. The group huddled together in an old, abandoned factory, the only place they could find that wasn't already under alien control. Maps of alien sites and remaining military outposts were laid out across a table, and the air was thick with urgency. "We know they've got the power," Sarah said, looking around at the faces of her fellow survivors. "But we don't know their weaknesses. Until we understand how they operate, we'll be no better than rats in a maze." One of the engineers, a quiet man named Alex, spoke up. "I've been looking at the technology we've managed to salvage from the wreckage of their ships. Their energy shields are impenetrable to our weapons, but I think we can find a way through. We just need to get close enough to test it." The team went silent, absorbing Alex's words. If there was any chance of turning the tide, this was it. Getting close enough to the alien ships, however, would be near impossible without drawing attention. They would need a distraction, a way to keep the aliens occupied long enough to carry out their plan. "Let's hit them where it hurts," Sarah suggested. "We know they have a central command hub in the old city. If we can cripple their leadership, maybe we can make them falter." It was risky, but it was a plan. The survivors began preparing for the next stage of their fight. Small groups were formed, and each one was tasked with sabotaging key alien installations around the city. They didn't have much in terms of weapons, just basic rifles, stolen alien tech, and sheer willpower. But their enemies were no longer just faceless invaders. They were conquerors who had underestimated human resilience, and now they were about to feel that underestimation firsthand. The plan to reach the central hub wasn't easy. The alien forces patrolled every street and alley with ruthless efficiency. They had set up checkpoints throughout the city, scanning every vehicle and person who moved. But the humans had adapted, learning how to blend into the environment, how to move undetected. The element of surprise was their greatest weapon. Sarah's group, composed of just 10 people, moved through the shadows, inching closer to the heart of the alien stronghold. Their hearts raced as they passed alien patrols, each one looking for any signs of rebellion. The tension was unbearable, but they had to stay focused. A single mistake could mean the end. After what seemed like hours of moving cautiously through the streets, they reached the central hub, a heavily guarded, towering structure surrounded by alien soldiers. It was the command center of the invasion, where decisions were made and orders were sent out to the alien fleet. Destroying it would cause chaos among the invaders and delay their plans. "We've got one shot at this," Sarah whispered, her eyes scanning the area. "Once we breach that perimeter, there's no turning back." The team split up, each taking a different path to avoid detection. Sarah and a few others positioned themselves near the main entrance, ready to storm the gates. Alex and another engineer were tasked with planting explosives at the tower's base, ensuring that the structure would come down without warning. The rest of the team was stationed around the perimeter, ready to cover their escape. With everything set, Sarah nodded to her team. They moved as one, coordinated and silent. Their hearts pounded in their chests, but they pressed on. The closer they got to the command center, the more dangerous it became. Alien soldiers were stationed everywhere, their sharp eyes watching for any signs of movement. It felt like walking on a tightrope, knowing that one slip-up could lead to disaster. Finally, they reached the base of the tower. The plan had been simple: breach the entrance, plant the explosives, and escape. But the closer they got to their target, the more difficult it became to ignore the gnawing fear that they might not make it out alive. The alien forces were smart, and they would have backup forces nearby. They wouldn't have long before reinforcements arrived. In the blink of an eye, Sarah and her team launched their attack. They breached the entrance with a powerful explosion, sending shockwaves through the compound. Alien soldiers were thrown into disarray as they tried to regroup, but it was too late. The humans were already inside, moving quickly to plant the explosives. The whole place felt like a ticking bomb, and every second counted. Gunfire rang out, but Sarah and her team fought back with everything they had. They didn't have much time, but they were relentless. As Alex finished setting the charges, he shouted, "Get out, now!" The team made a hasty retreat, weaving through the chaos as the building shook. They moved as fast as they could, knowing the explosion was coming. They reached the outskirts of the compound just as the tower exploded, sending a massive shockwave through the city. The explosion was so powerful that it knocked them off their feet, and the streets were filled with debris and dust. The command center was gone. The alien forces were thrown into chaos, and for the first time, humans had struck a decisive blow. Sarah and her team, battered and bruised, stood in the wreckage, knowing that this was only the beginning. The aliens had underestimated humanity's resilience, but they wouldn't make the same mistake again. The counterattack. The explosion of the alien command center sent ripples of chaos through the invader ranks, but humanity's victory was still fragile. The alien empire, though shaken, was not defeated. Their forces reorganized swiftly, and reinforcements from their homeworld began to pour in. The survivors of Sarah's group were left with no time to rest. The resistance had made a bold move, but it had also drawn the full attention of the alien forces. The next phase of the fight would be even harder. For days, Sarah and her team regrouped and planned their next steps. With the destruction of the command center, they had gained valuable intelligence on the alien fleet's movements. But this was no longer about small-scale sabotage. The aliens had begun to retaliate with far greater force. Sarah knew that the resistance could not hope to win if they kept playing defense. It was time to take the fight directly to the heart of the alien invasion. A risky but crucial part of their plan involved targeting the heart of the alien fleet, their massive flagship. This ship was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Towering above the Earth, it acted as both a command center and the central hub for their remaining forces. If it could be destroyed, the invaders would lose their ability to coordinate, and their invasion would fall into disarray. But striking at the flagship meant infiltrating an area swarming with the most dangerous alien soldiers and their advanced weapons. The risk was enormous. Sarah gathered her team for the briefing. Tension was high, but so was determination. They all knew the stakes. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about making sure humanity had a future. "Taking down the flagship won't be easy," Sarah said, her voice steady, but filled with urgency. "It's well guarded and heavily fortified. But it's also their Achilles heel. If we succeed, we'll cripple the entire fleet. But failure isn't an option. We don't get a second chance." The team nodded in agreement. Each member had lost friends, family, and comrades in the battle for Earth. Their resolve was unshakable. They set out under the cover of night, using the shadows as their ally. They moved quickly, knowing that any delay could mean an alien patrol would spot them and destroy their chances. They approached the flagship's landing zone, a giant structure floating above what used to be the capital city. "Steady now," Sarah whispered as they neared the base of the floating vessel. Their path was blocked by alien sentries, their movements precise and deadly. The soldiers were everywhere, scanning for intruders. The slightest noise would give them away. They had to move like ghosts. Sarah's group split up to cover more ground. Each person had a specific role. Some would create distractions, while others would get close enough to plant explosives on the flagship's hull. Alex, the engineer, had managed to find a weakness in the flagship's armor. A small breach in its lower section was all they needed to plant the charges that would bring the entire ship down. The tension in the air was almost suffocating. Every movement felt like a lifetime. As Sarah and her team approached their target, the alien sentries were more focused than ever. They had grown cautious after the recent attack on the command center, and they knew humans were capable of taking down even their most fortified structures. Now, Sarah mouthed to her team as they reached the breach point. The explosive charges had to be planted in just the right spots to disable the flagship's power core. With the aliens patrolling close by, any misstep would result in death. Alex worked quickly, his hands steady despite the looming danger. He had seen alien technology up close and understood its complexity. The explosive charges were designed to disable the ship's energy grid and cause a chain reaction that would destroy it. The clock was ticking. The others provided cover, firing at any alien soldiers who approached too closely. They were running out of time, and every second counted. The explosion when it came was a roar of thunder, a shockwave that rippled through the city below. The flagship groaned, its shields flickering as the power systems began to fail. For a brief moment, it seemed like the invaders were too stunned to retaliate. The humans had succeeded in planting the charges. The ship's core was destabilizing, and the countdown to destruction had begun. But the aliens weren't caught off guard for long. They had learned from their earlier mistakes and quickly regrouped. The resistance was still deep inside their territory, and now the aliens knew exactly where they were. As the humans began their retreat, alien forces closed in fast, firing relentlessly. The flagship's core was failing, but it wasn't destroyed yet. As Sarah and her team fought their way back through the increasingly hostile streets, the sound of explosions and blaster fire filled the air. The once proud city had become a war zone. The resistance had become hunted prey, and the aliens showed no mercy. "Fall back! Fall back!" Sarah yelled as the group raced toward their escape route. The flagship was about to explode, but they had to make it out alive first. Alien ships began descending, preparing to intercept any survivors. The team moved quickly, but the pressure was mounting. Each member of the resistance fought to hold off the alien forces just long enough for everyone to escape. It felt like the end was near, but the humanity within them refused to be extinguished. They would survive. They had to. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached their escape point, a series of tunnels beneath the city that led them to safety. Behind them, the flagship exploded in a spectacular burst of light, shaking the ground beneath their feet. The sound of the blast echoed through the city, signaling a major victory for humanity. But the cost was steep. As Sarah and her remaining team members took cover in the tunnels, they counted their losses. Several had not made it, but their sacrifice had not been in vain. The flagship, the heart of the alien invasion, was no more. The aliens were left in disarray, and for the first time, Earth had struck a decisive blow. But there was no time to rest. The war was far from over. The aliens would regroup, and soon they would launch their next attack. But humanity had shown them that they would not go down without a fight. The aliens' secret, the aftermath of the destruction of the flagship, was bittersweet. Though the alien empire had suffered a massive blow, the resistance was well aware that the battle was far from over. The alien forces quickly regrouped, their response swift and methodical. They weren't simply going to retreat. They were adapting. And as they did, humanity was left to pick up the pieces and plan for what was coming next. Sarah Carter, still reeling from the loss of so many of her comrades, knew that the next stage of the war would be crucial. Humanity couldn't rely on luck alone. They needed to know more about their enemy if they were to win. It was time to dig deeper, to learn the true nature of the invaders. In a secret meeting with her top strategists and engineers, Sarah demanded answers. "We've destroyed their flagship, crippled their communication network, and even started to turn the tide. But we need to understand them. Why are they attacking Earth? What's their real goal here?" One of the engineers, a quiet but brilliant woman named Elena, spoke up. "I've been analyzing the alien technology we've collected, and there's something I discovered that I think you should see." Elena showed them a series of encrypted files retrieved from the wreckage of the flagship. The files contained alien data streams, but after hours of decrypting, they uncovered a shocking revelation. The aliens weren't just invaders. They were survivors. Their homeworld was dying. We've known that they were technologically advanced, but we never understood the full extent of their situation. Elena said, her voice filled with disbelief. "Their planet is on the brink of collapse. They have no resources left, no hope for survival unless they take Earth." The room went silent as the weight of the revelation sunk in. The invasion wasn't just about conquering Earth. It was about desperation. The aliens had come to Earth not because they wanted to rule, but because they had no other choice. Their planet was dying, and Earth, with its abundant resources, was their only hope for survival. But the more they took, the more they destroyed, fueling the desperation further. Sarah stared at the screen, processing the information. "They didn't come to conquer us. They came to survive," she muttered under her breath. "And now they'll do anything to make sure they get what they need." Elena nodded gravely. Their fleet was designed not only for warfare, but also for resource extraction. They've been stripping Earth of its natural resources at an alarming rate, and they've been hiding it. That's why they're so relentless. If they don't take what they need, their species will perish. Sarah's mind raced. The discovery changed everything. The resistance had been fighting an invader, a conqueror, an enemy that sought to crush Earth and take over its resources. But now they were fighting something much more tragic. A species on the brink of extinction, using Earth as their last chance to survive. It raised a new moral dilemma for Sarah and her team. Could they truly destroy a species fighting for survival, even if it meant the end of humanity's future? "We can't let them win," Sarah said after a long pause, determination building in her voice. "But we have to understand their desperation. We can't wipe them out without considering the cost. If there's any way to stop this without total annihilation, we need to find it." Elena and the others agreed. The battle had just become more complex. They weren't simply fighting an empire anymore. They were fighting for survival against a species that had run out of options. And while their goal was clear, to protect Earth, their methods needed to evolve. The resistance decided to send a small team to try and communicate with the aliens, to learn more about their plight, and to see if a peaceful resolution was possible. But this was a risky move. The aliens were not known for their diplomacy. They had come to Earth with one goal in mind: to take. The idea of a peaceful solution seemed unlikely, but it was a chance they had to take. Meanwhile, the alien forces on Earth had grown even more desperate. They had been forced into retreat, losing ground with every passing day. But there was one thing the humans had underestimated. The alien emperor was willing to do anything to save his people, even if it meant sacrificing everything else. The aliens were preparing for one final push, an all-out offensive that would either secure their survival or wipe out humanity for good. As Sarah and the resistance leaders debated their next move, the air was thick with tension. Their forces were far from ready to face the full might of the alien empire. But they had one thing that the aliens didn't: the will to fight, the hope for survival, and the knowledge that humanity would never give up. But one question lingered in Sarah's mind. If the aliens were willing to destroy Earth for their own survival, how far would they go to ensure that humanity would never rise again? And more importantly, would humanity be able to live with the consequences of its choices if they chose to fight to the bitter end? The next phase of the war was coming. The truth had been revealed, and now it was up to humanity to decide what to do with that knowledge. A few remain. The weight of the discovery that the aliens were not just invaders, but a dying species fighting for survival, left the resistance in a moral quandary. The decision was no longer as simple as fighting to protect Earth. It was about deciding how far humanity would go to protect their future, and whether they could risk destroying a species fighting against extinction. Despite these new revelations, the aliens' intentions were clear. They needed Earth's resources, and they would stop at nothing to get them. The final push from the alien empire was coming, and the resistance was running out of time. Sarah knew that the survival of humanity depended on one thing now: preparing for the fight of their lives. The resistance was now a mere shadow of its former self. After the loss of so many in the previous battles, only a handful of survivors remained. These few men and women had fought through the worst of the invasion, witnessing the deaths of friends and comrades. But the bond they shared was unbreakable, and their resolve to protect their world only grew stronger. As Sarah gathered the remaining survivors in their makeshift war room, the reality of their situation hit her. Their numbers were small, so small that they barely had the strength to mount another counterattack, let alone stop the oncoming alien storm. But she couldn't afford to show weakness. They had come this far, and they had one final chance to turn the tide. "We can't give up now," Sarah said, standing in front of the team. "The aliens are gathering all their forces for one final strike. If we let them hit Earth with everything they've got, they'll finish what they started. But we can't let that happen. We fight. We fight until the very end." Each face around the table was weary, their eyes heavy with exhaustion. Some of them had lost everything in this war: homes, families, comrades, but they still held the spark of defiance. They had survived against overwhelming odds, and now, even with all the losses, they were ready to stand once more. Sarah continued, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "The only chance we have left is to destroy the heart of the alien invasion, their final weapon, the power source that drives their fleet. It's located in the middle of the enemy's remaining base. We hit them there, and we disable their fleet for good." The team listened intently, knowing how dangerous this mission was. The heart of the alien base was heavily fortified, surrounded by layers of defense that no human force had yet penetrated. But Sarah had a plan. It was their last hope. She had studied their tactics, their patterns, and she knew where they would be weakest. The final battle would be their most daring yet, and it would take everything they had left to succeed. The survivors were divided into small teams, each tasked with completing a specific objective within the alien base. One team would infiltrate the outer perimeter, drawing the attention of the alien forces. Another would sneak past the defenses to plant explosives in key areas. And Sarah's team would focus on reaching the power source and shutting it down. As they moved toward the alien base, the tension was unbearable. Their paths were fraught with danger, alien patrols lurking at every corner. But there was no turning back. They moved with urgency, relying on their instincts and the years of training they had gone through to stay hidden. The sound of alien footsteps echoed in the distance, growing louder with every passing moment. Finally, they reached the outer defenses. The alien forces were concentrated in the middle, focusing on the incoming human assault. This was the perfect opportunity for Sarah's team to slip past undetected. They moved swiftly, covering each other as they crept through the shadows, careful not to alert the enemy. Once inside, the real challenge began. The alien power source was located deep within the heart of the base, a massive, pulsating core that powered the entire fleet. It was heavily guarded, surrounded by alien soldiers who would not hesitate to kill anyone who approached. Sarah's team advanced carefully, keeping their heads low and their weapons ready. They knew that if they were spotted, they would be overwhelmed in seconds. But time was running out. They reached the core chamber, and there it was, an enormous, glowing energy source that hummed with a power unlike anything they had ever seen. The fate of the entire human race rested on this moment. "Get the charges in place," Sarah ordered, her voice a calm contrast to the chaos outside. The team worked quickly, planting explosives around the base of the energy core. Every moment felt like an eternity, but they couldn't afford to hesitate. One wrong move and everything would be lost. As they finished the setup, the sound of alien footsteps approached. Their time was up. The team had to escape, and they had to do it now. Sarah gave the signal, and they moved as quickly as possible, retracing their steps through the alien base, their hearts pounding in their chests. They were almost at the exit when the first shots rang out. Alien soldiers had spotted them, and the chase was on. The final battle had begun. Sarah and her team fought their way out, firing their weapons as they tried to hold off the advancing alien forces. The explosions they had planted would only delay the aliens, but they needed time. Time to escape and time to let the charges do their work. As the alien soldiers closed in, the survivors gave everything they had, fighting not just for their survival, but for the survival of all humanity. With one last push, they broke through the outer defenses, racing toward the exit. Behind them, the alien base was engulfed in an explosion so powerful that it shook the earth beneath their feet. The core had been destroyed. The alien fleet was left without power, and the invaders had been crippled. But as Sarah and the remaining survivors made their escape, they knew that while they had won this battle, the war was far from over. They had destroyed the heart of the alien invasion, but the invaders were not done yet. And more importantly, they still had to face the truth about their enemy. Their final push for survival was a dangerous, desperate thing. Earth had survived for now, but the next step would be critical. Would they continue fighting? Or would they find a way to end the war before it consumed everything? The final moment. The earth trembled beneath their feet as Sarah and the remaining survivors staggered from the wreckage of the alien base. The explosion that had sent shockwaves through the alien fleet was deafening, but it was also the sound of victory, a victory hard won with blood, sweat, and sacrifice. The power core of the alien empire had been destroyed, and with it, the invaders' ability to coordinate their forces. But the cost of this victory had been high. The resistance had lost many of their bravest warriors, and even Sarah herself felt the weight of their loss. There was no time to mourn. The war wasn't over yet. As they made their way through the chaos, Sarah took a moment to look back at the wreckage behind them. The once proud alien base lay in ruins, a symbol of humanity's resistance, but it also marked the beginning of something new. The aliens had been devastated, but the fight for Earth's survival was still ongoing. While their primary weapon had been taken out, the remaining alien forces were still dangerous, and they had no intention of surrendering. Sarah had led her team through this final assault, but now she had a new burden to carry, the weight of the future. Humanity had survived, but the road ahead would be long. The aliens were broken, yes, but their fleet wasn't the only force they had to contend with. The alien emperor, leader of the empire, was still out there, and he would stop at nothing to ensure the survival of his people, even if it meant total annihilation of Earth. "We've won this battle," Sarah said to the remaining survivors as they moved forward, their exhaustion palpable. "But there's still a war to finish. We need to keep pushing. The aliens won't give up. They'll come at us harder, but we'll be ready." Her words, though filled with resolve, did little to mask the exhaustion and sorrow in her eyes. The human spirit had been tested like never before, and now, with their enemy's heart ripped out, humanity stood at the precipice of a new chapter in their survival. The final alien offensive would come soon, but it was no longer just about the aliens' plans. It was about the will of the human people, their determination, their strength, their willingness to sacrifice everything for their future. Sarah knew that the resistance would continue, but it was up to her to lead them through this final phase, to bring hope to the shattered remnants of humanity, and give them the strength to finish what they had started. "We may be few," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper, "but we are mighty. We've shown them that we can stand against the greatest force the universe has ever known, and we will stand again, together." The survivors, though few in number, stood tall. There was no question about what they would do next. They would fight, not just for themselves, but for every person left on Earth, for every life the aliens had threatened to take. The future of humanity was in their hands, and they were ready to face whatever the aliens threw at them. But as they prepared for the final confrontation, Sarah couldn't help but wonder, what had become of the alien emperor? The destruction of their fleet would have shattered his control, but desperation made creatures do terrible things. Had he given up, or was he planning something far worse? Soon, they would know. The final showdown was approaching, and this time, it wouldn't be just about defeating an army. It would be about defeating the last remnants of the alien empire. And perhaps, finding a way to end the war without condemning both species to extinction. The Earth had been scared by the invasion. Cities were in ruins, lives had been lost, and the survivors were few. But humanity's spirit was unbroken. Sarah and her team had shown that even in the face of overwhelming odds, they could stand strong and fight back. They would continue to fight, not because they had to, but because they could, and because they had no other choice. As they prepared to face the final battle, Sarah knew one thing for sure: humanity would not go down without a fight. Earth was theirs, and they would do whatever it took to keep it that way.